Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Raising Vibrations Radio. I'm your host, Reverend Raven, and tonight we have the fabulous, the awesome Douglas Warner joining us. Say hi to everybody, Douglas.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to do my best to live up to something she just said.
Oh no, I've been watching your videos all day today, and I'm pretty
Oh,
sure you're going to live up to that. You
thank
have a
you. Thank
pretty
you.
amazing message that you're sharing with people, and let me
Thank you.
just commend you for all of your work that you're doing out there to help
Thank
people.
you. Thank you very much.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's just go in for the nitty-gritty and find out a little bit about yourself.
Okay. And I'm going to start. I think all of it becomes kind of important for the story. I'll start way back in the beginning. Born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri. Grew up in a Catholic home. I was raised as a Catholic, have a Jesuit education. Went to the University of Missouri, where I got a bachelor's in Middle Eastern history. And ironically, coming out of college, and people are going to, my parents even said, "What are you going to do with that?" And I didn't really have a good answer, but it unfolded down the road. I worked as an artist actually for about 3 years out of college. And one of the pieces that I created at that time is at the Holocaust Museum here in St. Petersburg. And another piece, it was at the World Headquarters of CARE in New York. I think they moved the headquarters to Atlanta, but hopefully nobody took those to a thrift store or anything. To my last knowledge, that they're there. And from that time frame, I went into joined the Army, and I was in the Army for 11 years as an intelligence officer. And during that time, I served a good bit of time in overseas. Lived in Europe for 5 years and spent probably more time than I wanted to in the Middle East. Um, and so after 11 years in the Army, and there's any of these areas you'll start to see some dots being connected. I was involved as an intelligence officer doing some real time uh, uh, intelligence collection, human intelligence collection, and what it required of me was actually very negative. In fact, over that time frame, it was became highly damaging to me, my my psyche, my spirit. It was just negative stuff. Uh, I was proud to serve my country, but uh, it was killing me, honestly, in all sorts of levels. And fortunately, I was after 5 years in Europe, I was able to come back to the Tampa Bay area, and I was still in the Army. And I got out. I stopped. I quit. And that was the catalyst for me getting out of this. Because people are saying, 11 years, you should stay in because you can retire 9 more years. I said, well, I'm not going to survive 9 years. So one day, the stress was mounting incredibly. It was damaging my life, my marriage, and everything. I'm driving home. I was in the Tampa, and I don't know if any of you here I know Reverend Raven knows, but the Tampa Bay area, we have the Tampa side and the St. Petersburg side. And I was working in Tampa, living in St. Pete, and I have to cross this bridge across the bay every day. And at sort of the peak of the stress, I was working here now in Florida, doing the same kind of job. I was driving across the bridge, and all of a sudden, I broke into a cold sweat, had tunnel vision. The traffic was crazy. I thought I was going to die. I really did. Later on, but I'm not scared of heights, by the way. I mean, I jumped out of airplanes for years. Okay, so I'm not scared of heights. But later on, I realized as I had someone explain to me, I was having a panic attack.
Lord.
Exactly. And when I got to the other side, I pulled over. As soon as I got to the other side of the bridge, I pulled over and I said, this is it. Now, I'm going to say that was one of my first really concrete callings. Because I believe that I've had a number of callings. I believe we all have callings in our lives. One of the difficulties, at least for me, was listening to them, paying attention to them, and understanding there's a calling. And I I had a good friend of mine who's one of my students, one of my yoga students, who said he was in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. He said they have a saying there that when God speaks to you first in a whisper and then a roar and then with a 2x4, depends on what you need. Well, that was my 2x4 because I wasn't paying attention for a long time. That was my 2x4. And so anyway, I got jumping from that, I decided to resign. And I didn't really have a plan. I didn't have a plan what I wanted to do, but I knew one thing. I had to pivot. And this idea of pivoting, doing a 180 is important because you'll later on when we talk about some of the things we're going to talk about, that pivoting is, I've come to realize how critical that is and how significant it is.
Is that
I
like an
know.
aha moment for
Oh,
people?
it was a big aha moment. It was yeah. And probably I've had a lot of aha moments before that, and I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't really listening. I
Uh-huh.
just kind of try to think through it, push through it. But this was a big one. And I also remember my dad, had a heart attack and triple bypass surgery. So I'm going, oh my God, here it is. I'm in my 30s, and I'm gonna die of a heart attack on this bridge. So anyway, I got on the other side. I said, I'm out. I resigned, and I became a massage therapist. And
Wow.
that just kind of threw a lot of people. And I had to explain to him. I said, no, it makes a lot of sense. I said I needed to do something healthy. I've been doing so many damaging, unhealthy things, not for me and other people that I was working with, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, it was time to do something healthy, and it wasn't all altruistic. It wasn't, oh, I want to help and save the world. No, I was trying to do something healthy for me first. I needed to get my energy in order. I needed to get my health in order, my this health, and the rest of me. And here in the Tampa Bay area where I live now, um, we had some massage schools that were really good. And so anyway, I went to training, became a massage therapist. As I come to reflect on this, it was a classic case of the wounded healer. Some of you may have heard of that
Yeah.
concept. And that's what it was. I was wounded. I mean, and not physically with a bullet, but otherwise. So I started getting involved in body work and energy work and Reiki, and some of you might be familiar with that, and therapeutic touch and what have you. And that was it was working for me. It was helping me move in the direction I wanted to go. I was doing something positive. Um, I was aligning. My energy was different, et cetera, et cetera. And that was sort of the beginning of moving in the direction I'm working in now. And I'm still a massage therapist. I've been a massage therapist now for over 28 years. Uh, Still do it 5 days a week as part
What
of what
did
I
your
do.
family think about that? I mean, you were in the military doing special ops. You come back to the Tampa Bay area and then boom, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to do something positive in the health field and massage therapy. Like,
Yeah.
wow.
Well, I have to say my parents were gone by that point, but my wife and family, and I, just to let you know, I have two kids. I have two grown children. I have a granddaughter. I have, just to kind of give you an idea what my family is. And my wife,
Mhm.
my son is 36. He teaches high school Spanish in San Francisco, and my daughter is a stay-at-home mom. She lives across the street actually,
Aw.
and she's 32. But at the time, I just had my son, and they were supportive. My family was supportive. My parents, my mom and dad, never wanted me to go in to the military to start with. My mom was
Right.
scared. They were both World War II. My dad was in the Marine Corps, World War II, so he knew what that was about. And they neither one of them wanted me to do that, but it was something I needed to do. And that was maybe a little sidebar story down the road. But um, so doing massage, and as I go along, my son's growing, and he gets to the age of 15. And by the time he was 15, I was 45. So we were both kind of in this, I would call it a crossroads in life type of thing. And he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do in life. Now, I suspect the same thing for young women. I don't have that direct experience, but I know for a young guy, you get to be around 15, 16, and definitely 18 years old. you've got this thing. You want to prove yourself. You want to be challenged. You want a notch in your belt. I'm trying to figure out who I am, define myself.
Right.
And many kids, many young men and women now too, use the military as that direction to get that out of life. And my
Which
son
is a
started talking.
poor choice, I have to say.
I absolutely. So, saying that, my son starts talking about wanting to join the military when he gets out of high school. He was going to go to college,
Mhm.
but he wanted to join the military, and I was like, oh, I didn't want to be the dad that says, no, you're not going to do that, because that doesn't work.
No.
But I I I was thought, what is he really looking for? Now, my son and I have a very, very good relationship, tight relationship. We always have. I tell him I've only had to pull rank on him a couple times in his entire life. He's, but I was looking for something. I said I need to help him with this. We need an alternative to going into the military.
Right.
And so I put that out. I put that because I didn't know what to do. I put it out. So my habit at the time was we have a local library here in Largo, Florida, where I live, and it's
Yeah, it's a
beautiful.
very nice one.
It's a great library,
Yes.
and I'm a big library aficionado. So my habit to choose books in the library was there were certain aisles in the library, where the books were, that I knew I liked. That was the topics I liked. Of course, it was spirituality and maybe history and this type of thing. And I was walking down there, and my way of choosing a book very often it was kind of intuitive.
Mhm.
I Sometimes I'd be looking for a title or a topic, but if I'm just looking for something to read, I'd be walking down and I just said, what's talking to me? Well, I'm walking down the aisle of one of my favorite aisles at the bookstore or the library, and my eye caught a book that had a ribbon bookmark, and the ribbon was hanging off the shelf. And
Nice.
you don't see too many of those unless it's a Bible or something.
Right.
And I immediately went over to it and I pulled it out, and with the title of the book. And by the way, I recommend this book to anyone. It's brilliant. It's called The Art of Pilgrimage. And I had a vague idea. I mean, I thought I knew what a pilgrim was, or a pilgrimage was. Growing up Catholic, you think you have some idea of that,
Right.
but I really didn't. And so I'm reading through this book, and it's this guy's, the author's account of different pilgrimages he had been on, and he defined what was a pilgrimage, what was it, and this is a spiritual practice. It's embraced by religions. I mean, maybe some of you in the Christian tradition, they have pilgrimages to various holy sites. In the Muslim tradition, they go to Mecca every year. There's a pilgrimage there. So it basically, a pilgrimage is a journey to a sacred center. That's going to be important. The idea of a journey to a sacred center. If you're going to see this as a thread in the rest of the story. And I pulled this out, and there was one little chapter on the pilgrimage in northern Spain that many of you have heard of before. It's the pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, and it's called the Camino, El Camino. Now, actually, Shirley MacLaine wrote a book on the Camino, and there was a movie with, I'll think of his name in a second, made about some folks that went on the pilgrimage in the Camino. And I read about this, and it's only like the most famous pilgrimage in the Christian tradition
Mhm.
from the Middle Ages, and I never heard of it. So much for my education. So I'm a history major, Catholic, and I still didn't hear about this. Anyway, I'm reading this, and it hit me. That's it. We got to do this. That's the solution. And in my mind, it says my son and I have to walk this pilgrimage. It's 500 miles. It takes about a month if you do it straight through, and
Wow.
it's completely across the breadth of Spain. And the pilgrimage dates back to the Middle Ages. So I went home, and I had read this, and I meditated on it and a variety of things, and I thought, okay. So I pulled my son aside, and I said, hey, how would you like to go to Spain? I said, I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to go to Spain. Well, I said, how bad do you want to go to Spain? And he always, and so we have this kind of relationship. And he said, well, what do you mean? Because he knows Dad's up to something. I said, are you willing to walk across Spain? And he saw I was serious, and he said, yeah, let's do it. Now I had to sell this to my wife and what have you, because I envisioned this as something my son and I would do.
Right.
Which anyway, we trained together for months ahead of time. We researched it and we trained and what have you. My vision of this was going to be his, in quotes, rite of passage. Instead of having used the military or something that would be harmful, this would be his trial by fire. He's 15 years old, not too many 15 years old walking across, doing this pilgrimage all the way through. And we did the pilgrimage. And it was life changing. I mean, that's a whole story in itself. And we get to the end of it, and it took us 30 days, and I lost 4 toenails and 14 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, but and I'll kind of, anyway, I'm going to this because it really I didn't realize the significance of the pilgrimage at the time. It's to this very day, it's still unfolding for me. And he and I actually had our 20th anniversary of the pilgrimage this last summer. The pilgrimage we did. Anyway, we got to the end of it. I remember my son said when he came back and started going to school back in the fall, because we did it in the summer. We did it in June through July. And we went back to school, and he said, Dad, I've got a question. He said, my friends are asking me if I had a good time on this pilgrimage thing. I said, well, what'd you tell him? He said, I don't know. He said, "Oh, sometimes not so much." I said, was it worth it? He said, oh, hell yes.
Aw.
And he didn't. Now he's a good linguist. He spoke fluent German because his first 5 years of life were in Germany, and he studied in high school. He had no Spanish. But the impact that had on him, what he does now for a living, is he became a Spanish major in college, and he teaches high school Spanish in California. So that it had that kind of an impact on him.
Wow.
Also, one of the young couple that we walked with, they walked with us for a couple of weeks, and they were very impressed with him. He was the youngest guy we met on the trail, and they went back and ended up having a child, and they named their boy after my son Jason.
Aw.
Yeah, and he's still in contact with them. 20
Oh,
years.
that's amazing.
Yeah, for the last 20 years. So this to me was another calling. That book, you call it serendipity, you call it synchronicity. I agree with all of that. But to me, that I call that a calling, and I was called to pilgrimage. And I think it led to him having his own callings. So after the pilgrimage, I went into a little detail there because it does lay some groundwork.
I wanted to ask you something about that pilgrimage because that's
Hmm.
very interesting. Did you guys like sleep on the trail or was there hotels to sleep in?
That's a good point. That's a good question. No, actually, it's not an organized event where you get with a group of people and walk. I mean, some churches will do that, but most people, it's self-directed. It's
Uh-huh.
there, it's marked. And along the trail, there are about a day's walk apart. There are what they call pilgrim refuges. And think of a really kind of a real bare bones hostel.
Okay.
You get a bunk. Sometimes you might get a pillow. You got running water, but sometimes it wasn't hot. But it was a place to sleep, so you didn't have to camp. That was made a lot easier.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So anyway, so pilgrimage is behind us,
Uh-huh.
and my journey is unfolding continually, and I ended up getting involved. I'd done yoga in my life, just done it, then practiced it, not devoted to it in any way. But I got involved with the yoga school studio here in St. Petersburg, and it was maybe another calling, maybe. But I definitely I saw this is what I saw was this was something that I could learn and use as a therapeutic tool in my body work and massage. It was something that I believed would not only help me, but it would help others to be, because I was seeing how it was helping me. And I thought,
Hmm.
I can use this. This could be another tool in my toolbox for therapy. And I ended up becoming a yoga teacher. In fact, I've got the highest level yoga teacher around here, and they and I trained yoga teachers for a number of years. I'm still a yoga teacher, and I still teach some yoga classes. Uh, and then from there, it seems like this it's like maybe a flower blooming or layers of an onion, however you want to look at it. I started one of the things that really happened, I believe, through yoga, through all these things I've talked about, is I became less and less in need of the 2x4. It hit me upside the head. I was starting to pay attention a little more. So the book thing in the library. Okay, that might have been a whisper. It wasn't like a book hitting me in the head,
Right.
but I'm starting to learn to listen and pay attention to that the synchronicity and the messages that are around us all the time. We miss them. Most people miss them, most of them. But I was getting better at listening, and I started something kept coming up into my radar, into my spiritual and mental field of vision. I was meeting people. Books were coming my way. Something that I had been vaguely aware of, and that was the labyrinth. Now, the labyrinth, I can explain. I'll explain that in just a minute here. Um, but the labyrinth as another tool in my toolbox, another vehicle for helping myself, but also helping other people listen and grow and do these things. Because I was teaching meditation. As I was teaching yoga, I was getting more and more involved in teaching meditation. Uh, and I was looking for various tools, and I'd studied meditation in the Christian tradition, and I studied Tibetan Buddhism for a number of years here in Tampa Bay area, and then the yoga approach to meditation. So I was always looking for teaching tools and learning tools to, you know, kind of beef up what I was trying to do. Um, and so my career wise, I was still doing body work and therapy, and I was teaching yoga and meditation. So I was looking for more. So this uh, this construct, the labyrinth, literally just was put in front of me over and over again in a very short period of time. So I said, I need to pay attention to this. And so I started researching it, and synchronicity, things just started falling into place. And there's actually an organization in Northern California, just outside of San Francisco, the only place in the country that actually teaches you how to how to be a facilitator with the labyrinth. How can you use the labyrinth to help other people? How do you be a facilitator, a director, if you will?
Right.
Um, and I thought, oh my gosh. And I got involved personally using a labyrinth. And anyway, so I fast forward, I did go through the training. I went through the basic training and the advanced training for being a labyrinth facilitator. And now that is, I'm saying as I'm moving forward in my life, is becoming a bigger and bigger part of what I'm doing. If you're in a Christian tradition, you would say part of your ministry. It's part of my calling. I've done the massage therapy. I'm over 65 years old. These hands are getting arthritic. I don't know about this. um, but anyway, the labyrinth is, I'm going to say, at the heart of what I'm doing now. And so that's the story. Now, and that brings me from birth to now, pretty much.
Wow. I'm really, I mean, I'm amazed. One of the things I've noticed while you were talking is you mentioned a toolbox. Like you must have been a carpenter in a past life, or you really believe in the construction end of all of this. Am I picking up that vibe?
Oh, absolutely. I have, well, anybody who teaches anything or tries to explain things to people, I mean, you come up with you somehow comes out of your how you grew up. My dad was an engineer, and he was a wood carver,
Ah,
and so toolbox was something. I'm sure some or many teachers that I've worked with in various things, that my teachers, probably somebody else used toolbox, and I just snagged onto it because it resonated to me. And
right.
and one of the things too is, I know it's kind of an overused term these days, but one of the things that I've been trying to do, because the fields that I'm finding myself in tend to be dominated by women, whether it's massage, yoga, um, and meditation, and the labyrinth. I mean, even if you get into the labyrinth world out there, most of the people that are teaching this stuff are women. And there's no real, I think the reason for that is that it requires a level of intuition, and it requires a level of sensitivity that sometimes a lot of guys are just not comfortable with. And so when I try to use language that can relate to guys as much as women.
I love it. And you're right. Guys are, we're taught to be the man, go out there and do your job and don't feel anything and that type of
Yeah.
thing. But I'm seeing a shift in this now though. Especially with the younger
Yes,
generation.
there is definitely a shift. We're getting away from the John Wayne paradigm. In fact, there's a lot of young people don't even know who John Wayne was. So that might
Right?
be a no hit on John Wayne, but I think we're getting away from a paradigm of that, which is a good thing.
Yes.
It's always been part of what I'm trying to do, because I think as you're trying to participate in and share and teach and guide people into connecting with that higher consciousness of themselves. I quote, or I use the term for Carl Jung, the intuitive consciousness. Some people call the authentic self or the soul self. And those are all great terms, whatever works for you. I like the intuitive consciousness. And everything that I have been doing, now that I'm getting more and more aware, has been building blocks for helping myself and others connect to their intuitive consciousness and understanding how that serves us. And the labyrinth I've come to is, I believe, in my personal experience, is one of the most powerful tools to help us connect with the divine, our intuitive consciousness, and it incorporates everything, almost everything that I've been learning up to this point. So
So the labyrinth. A lot of us may not know what that is. Can you explain that to us?
picture's worth a thousand words.
Right?
Okay, so this is, I know I got a little
We can
halo
see it.
light reflection,
Yeah.
but okay, so this is one labyrinth. Not all labyrinths are exactly the same. And many of you have probably seen this or something like this somewhere. And just kind of take it in visually for a moment. And some of you may say, oh, yeah, that's a maze. And so the labyrinth, and I'll bring this back up as I speak. So
Okay.
you don't have to visually memorize this. But the labyrinth, if you look at it, it has an opening right here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is the opening of the labyrinth. It's the door of the labyrinth, and it is from here. Let me get my mirror image in place here. It goes from here, one circuitous route, all the way to the center. Now, I'm going to set this down for a second. So, a lot of you may have seen pictures of something like that. And if you've done puzzle book, those puzzle magazines or whatever,
Right.
sometimes even in crossword puzzle books, you'll have a maze, right, where you try to
Mm-hmm.
follow your way. And the difference, a maze and a labyrinth, are actually the opposite, the direct opposite of each other. Because the labyrinth is one circuitous route to the center, you can't get lost. All you have to do is follow the path.
Oh, I love that.
All you have to do is follow the path, and you will get to the center. Now, this is such a powerful metaphor.
Yes.
There are no tricks, there are no dead ends, there's no wrong way. Now, a maze is exactly the opposite. Visually, at first, it looks the same. But a maze rather has dead ends. It has wrong ways, and you get lost.
Right.
In a maze, you lose yourself. In the labyrinth, you find yourself.
Oh, that is so powerful.
It is. And the application, so the way this is now, I'm showing you a picture.
Hmm.
The way this is traditionally used, and I have used this, and I'll talk about that, but traditionally, this would be in a very large venue on the floor.
Right.
It could be set in stones in a floor. It could be, I have a portable labyrinth that I travel with. It's 24 by 24-foot canvas labyrinth with actually very similar to this. It's a little bit different. It's got some different motifs on it, but very similar to this. And it's large enough to put in the correct space, and people will walk the labyrinth, walk in and walk out. So what is the labyrinth? How is it used and what have you? But I'm going to preface this with just a little story. I say that I didn't have any experience with a labyrinth before what I mentioned. And then I realized when I started doing it, I said, I was introduced to this when I was 19.
Really?
When I was 19 and I was in college, a buddy and I over the summer, we did a backpacking trip, my first backpacking trip to Europe. And one of the places we were going to was France. And we're going to go to Paris because everybody goes to Paris. And one of our friends said, hey, if you're going to go to Paris, if you got time, you need to go to this little town. It's just like 45 minutes out of Paris. It's called Chartres. That's Chartres, pronounced Chartres. And it's this medieval cathedral, and they've got this really cool labyrinth in it. Now, I was 19 years old, and I've heard of a labyrinth, but I really didn't know what that was. They didn't
Right.
give us a lot of information, and I really didn't do my homework. So anyway, we're in Paris. We're all about ready to leave Paris, and I said, "Hey, you remember so and so said let's go to this Chartres place and check out the labyrinth. We got a day. Let's do it." So we go there. Really, really nice church. It's an older church, older than Notre Dame, kind of rustic. I think it was about a century earlier than Notre Dame. So we go into the church, and I'm looking around. Of course, I'm thinking it's going to be maybe a stained glass window,
Mm.
maybe a tapestry. I don't know. So we're looking around and it's like, couldn't find it. What is this labyrinth thing? And finally found a docent who was, and I didn't speak French, and I just said to the docent, labyrinth, where's this labyrinth? And he looked at me like I was stupid, and he just went, and I looked down at my feet, and I was dead center in the labyrinth.
Oh my goodness.
The labyrinth was in the floor of the cathedral, carved in the stone floor of the cathedral. Now that labyrinth was 42 by 42 feet. I was walking all over this thing. In hindsight, that was a metaphor too, because I didn't recognize the center, which I was in,
Hmm.
because I hadn't walked the walk.
Oh my gosh.
I
That is
hadn't
so
walked.
profound. Yes.
Yeah. So how do we use this thing? Again, I said my preferred method is a walking labyrinth.
Right.
And just as a note, these are becoming more popular throughout the country. Not everybody knows what to do with them, but other than just walk on them. What I do is I'll explain that in a second. So what is the labyrinth in general? First of all, this motif in its various forms is thousands of years old. In fact, it's not really known how old it really is. The labyrinth in its many forms has been found as an artistic motif and apparently as a spiritual meditative tool in most cultures around the world, to include Aboriginal and First Nation cultures. In fact, one of the oldest labyrinths in Europe, is actually in Spain, like a quarter of a mile off of the pilgrimage trail that I walked, but I didn't know it at the time.
Oh wow.
It was carved in a big stone. So it's a very old tool. It's a very old motif. In fact, I would put it personally in the the genre, that again, back to Carl Jung, as an archetype, an archetypical image that has a lot of connective power in our psyche and spiritually and energetically. And just again to look at this, you can start to see, and I don't know if we're going to even have enough time to go through all this today, but this incorporates two huge archetypes or patterns that we find in nature and in creation: the circle and the
Right.
spiral, and the spiral.
Got
And
you.
the circle is, of course, I don't have to tell you, circles are everywhere. In fact, uh, the circle is in all sorts of images or structures and images in creation, whether it's looking at the sun and the moon, or the trunk of a tree, the rings in a tree, or the way birds build their nests, etc. The cycles of the year. This is a cyclical cycle, a circle um, image, and it's also why the circle has become, it's always a very sacred archetype in most cultures. The spiral is found everywhere too, from the double helix of your DNA to the structure of the Milky Way galaxy to the structure of many seashells. So
Yes.
the circle and the spiral, on an energetic level, on an archetypical level, on a really deep, deep intuitive level, we resonate with that. It's literally in our DNA. Literally, it's in our DNA. And it also has, as a side note, there's been studies being done that this pattern and its various forms they mirror the energy patterns of the earth. And some of you may have heard, there's different in this study of geomancy, where the energy patterns of the earth. I'm sure some of your listeners, the audience today, has heard of this and maybe knows a lot more about it than I do. But this reflects energy patterns that they have found, especially at sites where old labyrinths have been constructed. So at various levels, this is connecting. The other thing that this is to me, and it is traditionally, because it's one circuitous path that you walk to the center and you walk back out, it becomes a metaphor for our life journey and our spiritual journey. The other thing is that walking this is a walking meditation. It's a walking meditation. And many people do walking meditation. Thich Nhat Hanh, who recently passed away, Vietnamese Buddhist monk, he was big on walking meditations. Walking the labyrinth has levels of connecting, but I'm going to say in a broad brushstroke that walking the labyrinth, I call it a soul stroll. It's what it does is it facilitates us to listen and connect with that intuitive consciousness. I say it's an antenna to the voice of the divine, because if we're using it to its full capacity, it's helping us stop the chatter here and open the listening here. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, it does.
Yeah.
I am totally, I mean, it really makes sense. And if you think about it, are we not walking a labyrinth every day of our life?
Absolutely. So along those lines, if you look at this, and it's, looking at a picture is not the same thing as actually experiencing it. But if you start to go here, I'm really having a hard time with this mirror image thing. But if you see, like here, you see this loop here?
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. So you have this, you're walking, all of a sudden you're walking, I'm good. And then all of a sudden it requires me to turn 180 degrees and go the other way. You can see
Yeah.
how that works, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How many times, so I asked people, how many times in your life have you had to pivot?
I can't count how many times I've had to pivot.
And I remember earlier when I was talking about, getting out of the Army and
Uh-huh.
doing a 180. Well, that was a
Yes.
pivot.
Yes.
And you seem to think you know where you're going, and all of a sudden your path requires you to turn 180 degrees, and it looks like at first blush you're going in the wrong way.
Right.
Wait a minute, I'm supposed to be going there. Now this is requiring this calling or this job I have to do or whatever life was throwing at me. I look like I'm going backwards. But all you have to do is follow the path. Because even though at first blush it looks like you're going backwards,
Hmm.
eventually it always takes you to the center. And the sacred center, so here is the overlap between pilgrimage, and this is a pilgrimage. This is a microcosm of a pilgrimage. It's a journey to a sacred center, your sacred center. So the difference between a pilgrimage and walking the labyrinth is I think it's kind of clever. I didn't make it up, but a pilgrimage, you go out, you go out of your home, you go out into the world somewhere to go back in. The labyrinth requires you to go into the labyrinth to come back out.
I'm
With
just, I'm like amazed by this because it feels like also too, you don't physically have to do this. You could do it mentally in your mind in your meditation too as well.
You can, it's a little difficult to do it visually,
Mhm.
but one of the things now with COVID, definitely got derailed doing live labyrinth walks for a while. Now I'm back into doing those.
Right.
Um, but what we those of us in the labyrinth facilitating world, what we did was we would use this type of device, and we would do it virtually on a flat platform just like this, and we would
Mhm.
do virtual labyrinth walks. We'd have this discussion that we're having now. All the students would have one of these, something like this, and then I would guide them, maybe play music or what have you, and with their finger, they would walk the virtual labyrinth with all of the direction I'm going to explain here in a minute. So
Okay.
you're walking it with your finger, not your feet.
Right.
But it goes to what you were saying. There are other ways. If you don't have access to walk the labyrinth, there are other ways to, have another experience with this. And yes, once you start to resonate with the lesson from the labyrinth and the pattern and what have you, you can internally guide yourself through a labyrinth. You may not have the same visual effect, but believe it or not, having just doing the finger labyrinth has a lot of the same effects as walking, because what the labyrinth does, and this is a kind of a basic meditation tool, it engages the body. And because how many failed meditators out there? I've been a failed meditator for many, many times.
Mhm.
And because, my nose didn't itch all day until I sat down and tried to quiet the body and meditate. And all of a sudden my nose itches, and then my head itches, and then, then I'm squirmy. Well, body's trying to get your attention because it's
Right.
not used to not having the input. Well, a walking meditation, especially something as engaging as the labyrinth, and even using your finger, it does two things. It engages the body, it dispels that physical energy. And it also, being as focused and engaging as this is, it helps you focus and concentrate, because the minute you don't pay attention to where your finger is or your feet are, you'll stray off the trail. So you're learning to focus and concentrate, and it's being aided. You're allowing yourself to draw inward because the body is being entertained to some degree, if you will. It's engaged.
Right. I get
So
that.
this is one of the advantages of having some sort of tactile tool to help with that. And you can do it completely internally over time. I think, I think as anybody could with a little practice. Even myself, if I don't, I still like using the hand labyrinth. And there's different ones that this is something, if anyone in the audience, I think, my contact information will come out a little bit later here, but if you have an interest in this, there's people who sell wooden engraved labyrinths for the blind, where they can actually follow the labyrinth and tactically follow the groove. You can do it for yourself. I mean, if you don't have to be blind, you can close your eyes and follow it. So you're getting a lot of physiological input, which is allowing you to turn off that external self and open yourself to listening. So what does that look like? How is this orchestrated? Well, a lot of different people do it differently. There's different ways to use this. This is used, and I'm thinking the walking labyrinth is being used now in weddings, in funerals, in divorces. People who actually, have an amicable divorce and they want to have some sort of closure, some sort of ceremony type closure to a
Hmm.
divorce. And so it's starting to be used ways. The way I prefer to use it, and is this, as I mentioned earlier, as a vehicle to open up a conversation with the divine, whatever you call it, God, Yahweh, Allah. It doesn't matter to me what you call it, the Great Mother, universal consciousness. But what is a good conversation? What the basic elements of a good conversation, I believe, is this: someone speaks, someone listens. You kind of go back and forth, right?
Right.
If one person is the only person talking, that's not a conversation. That's a
Nope.
lecture or an ego rant. So you need to be able to go back and forth. Most of us, when we approach the divine, um, I work with a number of Christian groups. In fact, I have a 3-day retreat I'm doing here in March, virtually. Unfortunately, I've done it with them live with the Methodist Church up in North Carolina. So I speak that language with them. I've taught earth-based religion folks and what have you. The spirituality is spirituality. The thread of truth runs through everything. But the point is that I talk about opening a conversation with the divine or God. We have to learn how to speak, and then we learn how to shut up and listen. Most people don't shut up.
Right.
Most people are going, I want, I want, I want. Oh, please, please give me this. Please give me this. Please don't let this happen. Please. Shh. You only have to say it once. The divine is not deaf. All you have to say it is once. Then you have to listen and pay attention, which, remember the 2x4?
Yes.
If you're not listening, you're not going to say, well, I wasn't answered. It was because you never stopped talking. So looking at, basically, this is how to open a conversation with the divine. So what I ask my students to do, we got the labyrinth on the floor, and I help them formulate an intention, call it a prayer, something that's not about the gimmies. Give me this, give me that. God's not an ATM or a candy machine. But how do I formulate an appropriate balancing intention? So we go through some lessons and some practices with that. In my opinion, and I didn't make this up either, this is coming from things I've been taught and things I've studied, what have you, is that all great spirituality is really about one thing: letting go. All the great spirituality is about letting go.
I agree with that. I totally 100%. Just from the experiences that I had in the last 20 years of watching people go. It is very true. That is a high spiritual platform, is learning to let go. I
So
agree with
I'll use a little story um, that I use. It's a teaching story. Um, in India and other places in Southwest Asia, they trap monkeys for a lot of reasons. Okay, usually not any good reason for the monkey. It's not a good look for the monkeys. Okay, but the hunter knows a couple of things about monkeys. Number one, they're inquisitive. Number two, they're greedy. So one of the methods is the hunter would take a huge, heavy jar, clay jar, I mean, like 100-pound thing, drag it into the center of a clearing, and the monkeys are up in the trees watching and what have you. And the hunter very theatrically will take an object, something shiny, maybe some food, and place it into the jar. Now, the jar is huge, except at the mouth of the jar, where it comes to a very small aperture.
Mhm.
He places it in the jar, and then he goes and hides in the bushes. Well, pretty soon, at least one monkey comes down and says, I got to check this out. So the monkey comes down. He wants what's in the jar. Now, the only way he can get his hand in that jar is to close his hand up like that. So he closes his hand and he weaves it into the jar and he grasps the object, right?
Right.
He's got it. And then when he goes to pull his hand out, he can't get it out because his fist is too big to come out of the opening of the jar.
Right.
He can't move the jar and he can't get his hand out. So the hunter comes over and collects the monkey, and that's the end of the monkey. So the monkey was the author of his own demise. What was the only thing he had to do to save himself?
Let go.
Let go. So the monkey trapped himself. So using that story as a teaching tool, said, what is it? This is usually the intention I recommend. Your version, your words, one sentence. What is it I need to let go of?
Control.
Okay. You may not know. Now you may know. You're practiced and you've been doing these things. A lot of folks have said, what is it I need to let go of to be free? And some people know right off, or they think they know right off, at least. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I need to get rid of this guy or this woman, or I need to get rid of that job or whatever.
Right.
But if you just put it out there, that's your part of the conversation. What do I need to let go of? Then I get in the center of the labyrinth here, which is fairly large. It's large enough you could have maybe 4 or 5 people in there. That's how big that is. I have 2 bowls. One bowl has clear glass stones in it. The other bowl is empty. Now, before the student goes into the labyrinth, first of all, they've got their question. What do I need to let go of? I give them a black stone, a glass stone. That represents your question or whatever it is you need to let go of. Some people know what they need to let go of. Some people don't. Some people know what they need to let go of, but they don't know how. Some people, their question may be, I'm pretty sure what I need to let go of, but I don't know where to start. So your question may be a little different. Maybe, how do I let go of what okay. So you take the stone, you say this once or twice to yourself in your head, and then with the black stone in your hand, you don't say that anymore. You be quiet, internally be quiet. And then you begin to walk the labyrinth. When you get to the center, you release the black stone into the empty jar and you collect up a clear stone. The clear stone, I mean, it's kind of obvious, would represent whatever it is you take out of the labyrinth. You could say, what's the answer to my question? It's clarity, what have you. And you walk back out. And at that point, I would have the students then journal, and there's various ways to journal. They could write, they could, I sometimes get out drawing paper and crayons and let them do something more visual. So now that I say it, I gave you kind of the outline or kind of the blueprint of how it works. There are 4 stages to the labyrinth. Reflect, release, receive, return. And I would throw a 5th one in there, transform. So you reflected, you created your intention or your question. Then you got into the labyrinth and you released something, the stone, the black stone. Right. You received the clear stone. You returned out of the labyrinth. And then you let it unfold. Don't rush to figure out what that clear stone actually represents. I tell folks, I said, it could take 3 seconds or 3 years for that to unfold for you, but listen for it. The transformation is often over time. Every once in a while, somebody, has that smack in the head aha moment that can happen. It happens all the time. I'm not saying it happens to me all the time, but it can happen. The idea is this is opening you to listen and pay attention to, you asked a question. Now you've got to be quiet in all sorts of ways so you can, and pay attention to what's going on. Because the answer may not come to you the way you think it's going to come. And the answer may not be what you want to hear.
I get that.
Yeah.
I get that.
So one of the I do a workshop, and I just actually the retreat. I told you I was going to be doing a retreat. We use the labyrinth in the church that I'm work with. They actually have a big 24 by 24 foot stone labyrinth in the floor of their church, and they got a hold of me about 3 years ago. They were looking for a facilitator to kind of guide them on how to use it. They had a donor who left them a bunch of money to do this, but the only thing they were allowed to do with the money is build a labyrinth. And they had enough understanding of the labyrinth. They thought it would be a good tool. They actually now have a labyrinth ministry in their church. So anyway, I got involved with them, and I've been to their church, and we've done a retreat using the labyrinth for different themes. The last time I worked with them, the theme was building spiritual resistance. And we were in the heart of COVID, and everybody was hunkering down and really everyone was going through a lot. Some people much more than others. And the theme of this one that I'm doing this March, using the labyrinth again, is becoming a healing presence.
Nice.
Albert Einstein said something to the effect of, be a healing presence in the world. And I remember reading that quite a while back, and that, being a healing presence is that if you want to say, what can I do? What can I do? Everything, how can I be of help? How can I be effective in the world? And this is something I actually experienced. And I think you meant in our conversation earlier, Reverend Raven, you mentioned your experiences. But I was a hospice in this time frame. I was doing all this massage and yoga and all this other stuff. I was a hospice volunteer for about 6 years as 11th hour. They call it now transitions volunteer, where you sit, someone who is imminent in their journey. They'll die within 24 hours. They believe 24 to 48 hours.
Right.
The belief is that you should not be alone. And
Right.
if the person has no family, or the family needs to break and they need to go eat dinner or whatever they want, somebody like me would come in and we'd sit with the person who was passing. And at that point, I realized that this was not an easy job. Some people say, well, it's not easy in the sense, if you want to, a lot of people could sit there. I know that folks who would do that same job, and they would sit and knit, or they'd read a book, which is, to tell you the truth, just having a person with you when you're passing, you're going through this, is very powerful. But the idea of being a healing presence, what does that mean? And I think a big part of it is doing everything we were talking about, learning to listen, learning to channel, the divine energy, the universal life energy, being a channel. It's not so much a doing, it's a being. But in order to be a healing presence, it requires us to do our own personal work.
Yes.
And the labyrinth for me has been a big tool to help me and then help others do their personal work, to clear their channels, and to listen, to be there to listen and to witness. Witnessing is a listening. Witnessing is huge, and I found that was one of the biggest things in being with those who are dying, is witnessing, the second most important time of their life.
Yes.
You come in and you go out.
Yep. And I agree with you. I believe that there should be somebody with that person when they're passing on. I really do. There is nothing, we shouldn't have to die alone. They say, oh, you come into this world alone and you die alone. No, that's not true. That's
Mm-mm.
not true at all. You're not,
No,
neither, even if there's not a physical being in the room with that person passing on, there's other beings there that the physical cannot see, the unseen beings.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think the more, and so if we can translate that, the more intuitively tuned we are as individuals, as we just go through our life journey and we interface with other people, we become aware of what you just said. Not just at the moment of death, but we're surrounded by these other spiritual beings,
Yes.
other spiritual energy all the time. And one of the advantages of the work we're talking about, And this is a meditative process, but meditation is just, this is prayer plus meditation. Okay.
Hmm.
Call it, and that's why I call it a conversation. Prayer, because meditation is just learning to listen. But when you add prayer to meditation, then you've got something, you've got a conversation, and you learn to listen for those answers. It could be, or just an intention, give me the strength to, the St. Francis prayer, give me the wisdom, give me the strength, give me the insight. You're asking for something, but you also have to be open to that. And once you're open, that intuitive consciousness, your higher self is open, which the labyrinth is, to me, it is the key and the lock. The key, the key master and whatever it is, the doorkeeper and the key master. It's both. It helps you open up to listen and to be present, both for others, but also for the guidance and the support that it's all around you. It's all around you. And, Joseph Campbell, the mythologist that probably many of you are familiar with, who passed away a number of years ago, he wrote The Power of Myth. One of the things he said is he said he pitied the person who did not have an invisible means of support.
I like that.
Yeah,
I've never heard that, but I like
yeah.
that.
We always say, well, he has no visible means of support. No, he has no. What about the person who has no invisible means of support?
I love that. I like this concept of what you're doing because you're right. Sometimes it's hard to quiet the body to be able to meditate and pray at the same time. And
Oh,
especially
absolutely.
for beginners, right?
So one of the things that I agree, it is. In fact, most people that I know, and so this kind of got me kind of going a little bit of not a real tangent, but I've been trying for a long time to try to, in teaching something, first of all, bottom line, my belief, especially and coming from the yoga tradition, a lot of things in teaching paradigm is I don't teach anything I don't have direct experience in.
Hmm.
Most people that teach things are teaching out of a book.
Right.
I read this, but they don't say, well, I read this. No, they're teaching things out of books and what somebody, they heard it, and then they start repeating it as gospel.
Right.
And one of the things that was impressive on me as a teacher is if you want to say, quote a book, do it, but just give the credits right. Put your footnotes down correctly. It's like, I read this in this place, or someone said to me this. If I say, and I tell my students, I said, look, I'm not going to teach you something that I don't have direct experience in. Maybe that keeps the field of what I can teach this big, but it's authentic. And so trying to teach meditation over the years, when I finally came into contact with this and learned how to use it, I was a kid in a candy shop. I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a powerful tool, because meditation, as I see it, is basically two skill sets. Number one is learning how to focus and concentrate.
Hmm.
And often that's the tough one for most people.
Right.
When meditation is being taught, most of the time, in most of the books and apps and everything you find, most of the time that's what they focus on, is learning how to teach you, or not even teach you, but give you a circumstance or an environment where you can, focus and concentrate a little bit.
Right.
And there's a lot of benefit to that. Reduces your stress level. Most of our stress or psychological stress comes from dwelling on the past or anticipating the future. So
Right.
if you have a way to bring your attention to the present moment, you tend to de-stress a little bit. But then what do you do with that? You've got that new tool in your toolbox,
Hmm.
that ability to focus and concentrate. The second skill set, number two, is to use that to connect with and live out of your higher self. In the yoga tradition, they call it the Atman, the authentic self. It depends who you're talking to, what words you want to use, but we're all talking the same talk.
Oh
I'll
yeah, I
call it.
call it flying my fly highing disc.
I love that. Okay, perfect. So, in fact, I can go back to something here. I think we got a few minutes too. One of the things I was exposed to years ago actually through the yoga, teaching some of the scripture of yoga, was this concept of the perennial philosophy. Perennial, of course, meaning reoccurring. Okay. And this term was actually coined, perennial philosophy was coined by the writer, thinker Aldous Huxley. But what was the perennial philosophy? It was this: there is a basic fabric of truth that is found in every spiritual tradition. And the early thinkers, if you will, in the prophets of the Old Testament, if you want, or the elders of indigenous nations, the shamans of old in the yoga traditions, it's the rishis. They had a direct experience through meditation, through, I say, prayer and listening, talking, speaking, and listening. But through deep meditation, they came to the same conclusion, some basic conclusions. And I've called this a thread that runs through. And the word thread in Sanskrit from the yoga, you may have heard of the word sutra.
Yes.
Sutra actually means thread. It's the root word or the origin word for sutures, like you sew up a wound. Okay. And the basic sutra is this: it's 3 parts. In deep meditation, they all came to this, which is really interesting. But this means they were tapping into source. In this world of change, apparent change, we look around and we see, people are born, people die, the seasons, and nothing's the same. Everything's always in flux. Yeah, the question: is there anything that's not in flux? And the 3 revelations, pretty much the same through these traditions, started like this: in this world of change, I'll go with this. In the world of change, there is a changeless reality. Everybody puts their stamp on it: God, Yahweh, Allah, Wakantanka, whatever you want to call it, Brahman. But there is a changeless reality. Number 2, that changeless reality is manifested in each human. In fact, some will say in every aspect of creation. Depends on your direction. In the yoga tradition, that changeless reality, that authentic self, that intuitive consciousness is called the Atman. In Christianity, it's called the soul, and other, et cetera, et cetera. So changeless reality, source, is manifested in each of us. And third, the purpose of life, not the meaning of life. There's a big, big difference, because there's books and books and books talking about the meaning of life. Meaning is the meaning. There is no meaning to life per se. But what's the purpose of life, of your life? One thing: to connect with and live out of that higher consciousness. Everything that we do should be moving us in that direction. And that is, I tell students, hey, for a few bucks here, you just got the purpose of life. Come on. It's a cheap read here, but of course, that's joking. It's not the easiest thing to do. But if you get clear about where you're going, you think at least you have a direction. That connecting with that's right there, the purpose of life, right there, your authentic self. And everything you do, if you use that as a sounding board or a mirror for your actions or whatever, is this moving me in the direction I say I want to go? If I say my purpose is to connect with my authentic self, my higher consciousness, the divine center in myself, everything else falls into place. Your decisions in life will be more aligned. When things go a certain way in life, you'll stay centered better. You'll be able to handle the trials and tribulations of outrageous fortune. Instead of trying to work on every little fire that gets lit in your lives, learning to, where can you find water? If you have water all the time, fire is not going to be your problem. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense.
So
I'm kind of speechless right now, which is really, that's a big thing for me. But I'm totally I'm getting it. I feel it. I understand it. It reminds me of things that I've experienced in my life. What you said about the three, that the source, the soul, and getting in and out of that. It makes sense. It's we come down here to experience things that we can't experience as source.
And it's a refining process. Um, so we're all familiar with how we make a diamond, or nature makes a diamond.
Hmm.
Okay, it starts out as basic hunk of coal, relative value,
Right.
and only under the correct amount of pressure and heat does it actually make a diamond. Pressure and heat. So without pressure, without resistance, we don't become that diamond. We, you know, the worst thing that can happen is to have an effortless life. It's not going to be a life it's not going to refine you. Yeah. It's not going to strip away the debris, the stuff that is not truly us. So, when I have this conversation many times with students who think, what's the meaning is, but not about meaning of life, because we're all getting so worried all the time, culturally, and not just Americans. I'm talking about pan culture, our
Right.
modern culture. We're worried about what are we going to be when we grow up. What's my job going to be? That's how we see our lives, as this vertical stepping stone of achievement. And that all seems fine until you're at the last moment of your life. And then you realize, oh, I climbed the ladder of success, but my ladder was up on the wrong wall. And what I was supposed to be doing, instead of building buildings and collecting money or what have you, I may have done that. It's not what I did, it's how or why I did it. And so if in our sights we put connecting with divine, connecting with authentic self, intuitive self, that's it. That's my goal. And as I follow that goal or that purpose, it will require me to do things. I might do this, I might do that. I've been given gifts. I've got some talents. I've got some shortcomings. And I use those. Am I using those for the right? Is it moving me towards my purpose? Is it moving me towards the center, to my sacred center, or is it? Am I doing it for the wrong reasons? And people will argue about meaning. Meaning is something that's up here. Purpose is something that's in here. And I'll point to the heart. This is metaphor. It's not the organ of the heart. We know that. It's heart knowing. Call the difference is head knowing and heart knowing. This is intellectual. It's a tool. The brain is a tool. It has a certain ability to do a lot of amazing things, but we're way over leveraged on the intellect in our culture.
Oh yeah.
This is the tool we need to the muscle, if you will, whatever the word is, to refine, because this is not about purpose. It's not about meaning. There's a story about Buddha. The Buddha was given a lecture, a sermon, whatever you want to call it. All these students and out in the audience, and one of the students said, Buddha, what's the meaning of life? And the story goes, he picked up a flower and just held it up, and they're all looking at each other like, what the heck is this? And there was one little monk way back in the back of the audience, and he kind of gave that little look like, yep. Buddha was like, one guy got it.
Hmm.
The flower has no meaning, but it has a purpose. It has a lot of purpose.
Yes.
And so meaning is something that we seem to think is important because of this cerebral
Hmm.
cortex thinking, but it doesn't have meaning. I think you alluded to that. We come here for a purpose, not a meaning.
Right.
So why do we keep looking for meaning when there isn't one? And
Because
people
we're
want to.
always overthinking
And we're
things.
always overthinking. People go, I don't understand. Why this happened. I can't. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense to your intellect, but it makes sense at another level. And if you were actually connected at another level, you would have more understanding of that, intuitive understanding.
Yeah, I find that I'm living with my 29-year-old son. He's moved back home, and he doesn't understand some of the things that I do. And he, because he's so intellectually, he's very
Mhm.
smart, but he doesn't understand what I'm up to, and it doesn't make sense to him. And so this plays all along with that too. But the neat thing is that we can all coexist even though we're not hanging around on that same level. I think your Labyrinth would bring that back together for many people that are on different wavelengths, but yet they can connect right there on the Labyrinth doing that.
I and I agree with you 100% because one of the downfalls of anything we do in the realm of trying to teach what this kind of stuff we're trying to teach or talk about or live or what have you is that we tend to default like I'm doing right now. Okay, all right, is into talking about it. Yet we're talking about something that you can't actually comprehend intellectually. And I something I it was handed to me as guidance a long time ago, and I really try to embrace it. Is that the purpose of a teacher or a guide, whatever you want to call it, is not to impart i- information. It's to or try to offer your experience, to your students. The
Mhm.
best thing that the teacher can do, or the guide, or whatever, a facilitator. I really like that word facilitator. I kind of back off this word teacher. I like the word facilitator because it's not a lofty thing,
Mhm.
but it's an important thing. So, as a facilitator, someone helping you facilitate whatever you're trying to do in life, is to, because of your own direct experience, is to do the best you can, is to put the student in a set of circumstances where they have an opportunity for their own direct experience. That's what I find that this does. It gets, I mean, I have to explain it. I did explain it tonight, but once you explain it to people, then they can wherever they find a labyrinth, people are creating these in their yard with stones. People go to the beach here and create them with seashells. I mean, there's so many ways to actually have a physical experience with a labyrinth, or just have one of these. And if anybody wants one of these in this audience, email me. We'll get the email out here. I'll make sure I can guide you, at least get you one. I'll email you a copy of one of these so you can have it at home. There's no money involved there. Um, but that is a direct experience. I can talk about what you're going to experience. I can't tell you what you're going to experience, but I can put you into this ceremony, this ritual, because this is a combination of using sacred space. This becomes sacred space, which is another conversation. Sacred space and meaningful ritual, and those things help give us an environment for us to have a direct experience. That's the best. That's the most powerful thing I think I can do is, okay, I've had my experience, whatever they are. And if it's something that someone else, I think it's important, or someone else wants it, um, let me see what I can do to help you have your own experience instead of just teaching mine.
I just put your email address down at the bottom so everybody can see that. And I've
Yeah, I
also,
see that. Thank you.
yeah, you're very welcome. And I've also put it in our comment section too, as well. Um, just listening to this tonight, I wish we had a Labyrinth here in St. Petersburg.
We do.
We do.
We've got a number of them here now. I know if not everybody, I assume not everybody listening, watching tonight is in St. Petersburg or in Pinellas County, Florida. But wherever you are, get on Google this. I didn't think I'd be telling people to Google things, but but this is something that was worthwhile to Google. Google labyrinths, and I'll spell labyrinth for you. If you just, it's LABYRINTH, labyrinth. And just, okay, let's say you're in Toledo, Ohio. Where are there labyrinths in Toledo, Ohio? And I don't think there'll be very many cities around the country that won't have something. Here in Pinellas County, open to the public, we have one down at Paso Grill Church, which is down in Paso Grill.
Uh-huh.
at the southern tip of Pinellas County. It's
Right.
outdoors, done in pavers in the front of the church. It's about 24 by 24 feet. There's one behind the Woodside Hospice in Pinellas Park. Very nice one.
Oh, nice.
The Veterans Administration Hospital has one here at in Pinellas Park area too. I think it's technically St. Pete, but so there's hospitals are using them, hospices are using them. There are corporate. They're being used in the corporate world, and most of the time, what they're being used for, because most people are not fully trained or educated about it, but they do realize that it's a walking meditation, and it's a way to at least quiet. It's meditative. Let's put it that way.
Mhm.
It's meditative. It has healing properties all on itself. Whether you know all these little things, these little ceremonies and rituals I've discussed, or what have you, you don't have to know all that. It's an experience, and it's just setting you up. Now, if you've got some of this other information and some of this discussion, what that does is it helps prepare the mind to step aside and let an experience happen. And that's one of the big things, because I've been teaching meditation and for a long time, and it's hard because it's like if somebody asks you what does it feel like, what's it like to go down this roller coaster? Well, you can talk about it all day, but you won't know until you go down the roller coaster. Or somebody wants to learn how to swim, and you say, well, here's 10 books on how to swim, and you could read 10 books on how to swim, but you don't know a thing about swimming until you get in the water.
Right.
And then the
Yep.
books, you don't need the books anymore.
Nope.
So
You're having that experience right there in that moment. That's it.
that's it.
That's all there is to it.
So anyway, wherever you are, uh, Google it, where there are labyrinths available to the public in your community. Email me, and first of all, I would love to open a discussion with anyone. I have email discussions with folks who are all over the country and in Canada, and actually too in Europe, who've been my students or just somehow we've connected, and I love opening a dialogue that way. If you're here locally, email me and I can get you in touch with I'll give you some information about some of the things I'm doing locally. I do retreats virtually and in person. I do workshops every month. Uh, Not all of it's some of it's yoga, but a lot of it's not. I'm doing a lot of labyrinth stuff.
Hmm.
Now that COVID is starting to release its grip a little bit, I'm going to be doing more and more live labyrinth stuff. I travel with my labyrinth. I've done this all over Florida, up in North Carolina. It tends to be kind of geographically that way if I have to drive. But anyway, if you want more information, or you want me to send you, just a copy of this, I can send you that so you have it at home. Play around with it. You don't have to remember all the little stones and all the stuff I do. Just start working with it. We tend to walk this thing with our finger or on our feet with the same energy in the beginning as we go through life. Many students, one of the first observations, if I sit down with them and I say, here, just take and trace it. And I do this before I go through a huge discussion. And I've got a lot of people who just start, and they're looking around to see if they're ahead of everybody else, and they're going to be doing this thing. And they get all done, and you can see they're smiling. And then we have the discussion. I said, how many of you felt like you won? Oh, I got people like, so you went as fast as you could. That's not the point. It's not a contest. But we're so contest and competitive that
Right.
we think that that's the purpose of this. In fact, going slowly is the way to roll. Now, I let them go do it. And I said, how many of you are moving on the labyrinth with the same pace you go through life? And most of the time, people who are going too fast and not paying attention, they get off path anyway. They get lost and they have to start all over again. How many
Yes.
times does that happen?
Yes, that is so very true. It's if I can, express this, it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Everything. We just to come full circle back, why I think I was so open to the labyrinth is because that's so many of the things I learned in pilgrimage feed right into the lessons of the labyrinth. It has nothing to do with, my son and I walked for 30 days to get to this cathedral, and it was like, oh, that's where we're going. That's where we're going. And we got there and it was like,
Hmm.
nice church. And then in reflection, it was like, it had nothing to do with the church. Think about
No,
the Wizard of Oz. Okay,
right.
Wizard of Oz. We got to get to the wizard. We got to get to the Emerald City. Go, go, go. But all these experiences along the trail, the yellow brick road, they get to what happens. They get to Oz, and what the wizard's a fake. It's a bald old man with nothing.
But they gained so much going down
It,
that path.
exactly, exactly. So there's an overlap between pilgrimage and the labyrinth. So I do hope that some folks will reach out to me and give me some opinions, give me some feedback of what you heard of. Maybe if you've had some labyrinth or pilgrimage experiences, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to hear them.
So earlier you said we could Google, find them. And what if we don't have a facilitator with us? What do? We just start walking?
Yep,
Just
the
start walking.
guidance. If you have this, what we talked about tonight, and if you just have some awareness of what this thing is about, okay, if you just have some understanding what it's kind of designed to help you do. If you have something and you may be a person who prays or has prayers or mantras or whatever you want to repeat, that's okay. But the act of walking the labyrinth and basically it's a moving meditation. Walk at your own pace. It's not a race, but it's also not walking down the aisle during a wedding. You don't have to do anything specifically spiritual or holy or anything. Walk just one foot after another. Walk in and walk out, and walk as many times as you want. And don't expect bells and whistles. Don't expect the heavens to open and suck you up into heaven or anything when you get done, or when. Just be present for the experience. And I can't help but believe if you just let go of expectations, let go of any sense of achievement, just be in the moment of walking, you'll have your own experience with it. And that experience will evolve. And that experience is much more powerful, much more significant than any of the little rituals or little things that we do or anything even I've had to say. Remember, I only say this stuff is to kind of help you jump into an experience of your own.
Right. It's all about relation of the
Absolutely.
thoughts. Yes. I'm so thankful that you came on here tonight and that you shared your life story with us and your journey, which is just absolutely amazing. And that pilgrimage that you took with your son, that's priceless.
It is. And, just as a footnote to this, he called me about a week ago, and he is going to, on his own, he's going to walk the pilgrimage again.
Wow.
And I said, and we talked about it, and he said, Dad, don't be nostalgic. He said, if you want to come, that's fine. I said, no, 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 no. That was a one-time event. We're not trying to have a reunion on this. I said,
No.
follow what makes sense to you, and it'll be a totally different experience. But it's in his vocabulary now, in his life vocabulary. And by the way, he never joined the army. He didn't need to.
Right. He didn't need to. He went on his own path, figured out what he wanted to do in life, and is living his life. That's
Absolutely.
beautiful. That is absolutely awesome. So
Well,
we only have about a minute and a half left of this show. I have your email address on there. If there's people here that are locally listening, like I've seen a lot of my friends tonight on here listening, uh, are you able to facilitate something here in local
absolutely.
area?
In fact, I wasn't trying to get too advertising here thing, but here's what I went. If you're local, and
Uh-huh.
even wherever you are, um, I am always looking for a place, a venue to do a labyrinth walk, which means I just need a space. And the labyrinth I have is really more appropriate for an indoor venue. It's 24 by 24 feet. I have done it in all sorts of environments. But if any of you have, pardon me, have knowledge of or people connected to, And I don't care what religion or what spiritual direction it is. That's not relevant to me. I mean, it's relevant, but it's not an issue here. Let me know, because I would love to connect with and see if we can set up an event, set up a labyrinth workshop and a walk. I would love to do that. So anyone, anywhere. I do travel, within some geographic. If you happen to be in the Yukon and you're watching this, I might not make it there, but definitely the local folks. I would be very interested in connecting with more folks about where can I share this? How can I share this with you?
I'm so thankful that you shared that with us, because that is something, especially for people that are getting into meditation. They're wanting to learn how to talk to their inner self. This is a great opportunity to do it, and it seems like it's a lot faster than sitting on our butt humming all day long.
I agree with you. I agree with you, and that becomes that's my experience. I'm just trying to make this as easy, as accessible as it can be. Taking the false mystery out and opening yourselves to the real mystery of this connection. And I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I'm no great meditator or anything like that. Maybe that's a good thing, because I had to keep looking for ways that would be more accessible to people like me. And I agree. And thank you so much, Reverend Raven, for having me here and giving me this unique opportunity to connect with these wonderful folks and get offer my whatever I can offer them as far as tools in the toolbox for the path.
Oh, I love it, Douglas. I hope that somewhere down the road, down the path, you'll come back and visit with us, because you have some more interesting things too. I found out by going to your YouTube channel.
That's right. And yeah, we can give that here. If you can't remember it or can't write it down, just if you email me, I'll give you that connection. But it's basically youtube.com/Douglas Warner, my name. That's all it is. Just Douglas Warner, capital D, capital W. And you'll go to my YouTube channel. I got about 50 videos there. Most of them have to do with meditation and kind of navigating life and using some of the tools we talked about. Not a lot in there about labyrinth. I but some general meditation tools that you can use. And it's much that's a whole nother discussion. Maybe next time. I thank you for inviting me back sometime. That I would love to. Maybe we can talk more about that.
Oh, I would love to. And one of my listeners, Dennis, that's down in Sarasota, just said, "Thanks, Douglas, for your enlightenment tonight." And you two might need to connect, because he's a body breath work person himself and a massage therapist, and he does some amazing things too. And he's been on the show, so you
Oh,
know
great. I'd love to hear from you, Dennis. Reach out and we can talk. Love
Yeah,
to.
that'll be awesome. So, well, with that being said, we're going to end the show. Again, Douglas, before I do, is there any one thing you'd like to share with our listeners for them to take away from all of this?
I would ask. I would say this: when you wake up in the morning, and this has worked for me, ask yourself today, how how can I be today a healing presence?
Oh, I love that. That's profound right there. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for
Great.
another edition of Raising Vibration Radio. Next week, we will have the infamous Rachel Love on here. Have a great and a blessed week, and we're sending you lots of love and energy. Good night, everyone.
Good night.